BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast, where we get very close to zero food miles by joining punters in a pub in the middle of a hop farm. And your Christmas poinsettias, are they under threat from the white fly police?
Last year, for example, we lost £185,000 worth. 80% plus of the total sales revenue is probably sunk into the crop at that point. If that crop is then thrown away, that's clearly devastating to a business's profitability.
We'll have more on that in just a moment. In 4 years' time, people will no longer have the sorts of county and district councils they have now. That's according to the Local Government Information Unit, the LGIU, a think tank and membership body for local authorities. A new government white paper published yesterday proposes fundamental changes with every region of England to get a mayor. And many rural areas which currently have a two-tier system of county and district councils could see these merged to streamline services. I asked Jonathan Carr-West, Chief Executive of the LGIU, what this will mean for people living in rural areas.
Those mayors are going to have powers over transport planning, some forms of strategic development like housing, skills, various economic levers. The question then becomes, what happens to local government underneath that? Because I think there's a recognition that to have a mayor and a county council and district councils, and in many places parish councils, becomes quite confusing, creates some duplication, is not necessarily efficient. The government has said that as part of this devolution process, it expects councils in two-tier areas, so in places where there are both counties and districts, to come forward with proposals for reorganisation. It's not making devolution conditional on that. It's saying they can do both, they're complementary. But by the end of this parliament, it does expect to see change in two-tier areas.
What are the opportunities then and the pitfalls of this new system coming in?
The challenge is to try and get the balance right between efficiencies of scale. Local government is under immense financial pressure. That's driven largely by adult social care and children's services, where we've seen demand and cost go up. You want to be delivering those big, expensive services at a bigger scale so that you can generate, economies of scale, you can commission effectively, you can manage the market. However, there are other services, possibly housing, possibly some elements of planning, for example, where you want to make sure that you're getting them right for local areas where they might look different in different places. And a county can be a very large area. So there's a balance between locally specific services that are effective and targeted to the conditions of a place and scale and efficiency. What's looking likely to happen is the government is saying they're expecting people to make proposals for unitary councils, that's councils that deliver all services, at around 500,000 people. So in most counties, that would be between 3 and, say, 5 local authorities across a county area. So that is going to be very different.
And what about organising this? Whose decision is it? Where the funding goes, how it can reach the right places and the right amount?
So one of the things we are yet to see, the government has opened this up as a process that is to be led by councils. There is a risk that we get distracted by a lot of very complicated movement. You're going to be moving staff from one organisation to another. You're going to be splitting some services up, amalgamating other services together. It can be done, but it is an involved, complicated process.
And the funding formula then for rural areas, that's been criticised, hasn't it?
In parallel to this devolution process, the government has announced a review of how councils are funded. It's committed to bringing in multi-year financial settlements. For the past 7 or 8 years, councils have just been given money 1 year at a time.
The thing is that we've done endless stories about services being much more expensive to provide for rural areas than urban areas. Is there going to be any ring fencing? Has anyone talked about rural areas in particular?
No, we don't yet know how the government is going to do what this fair funding review they're looking at.
The government says it wants this done by the end of the Parliament. So what do you think people in rural areas will end up with as their councils?
So there is a long road to travel. But I think the government is very clear that it wants to see change. I think most councils accept that there does need to be some change because the current model of local government is not working. So by the end of this Parliament, I think we can be fairly confident that the sorts of county and district councils that people currently live in will not be there anymore.
Jonathan Carr-West, Chief Executive of the LGIU. Now, all week we're propping up the bar in a rural pub. Well, not exactly. We're taking a closer look at the future of rural pubs, which have been under immense financial pressure over the last few years. And it's not just the pub. The hop growing industry has also faced challenging times. Growers had to contend with the fallout from COVID and high energy prices. But for one farm near Worcester, establishing a local pub and brewery in the hop yard has proved a great success. Bob Hockenhull has been to visit.
The convivial chatter you can hear is coming from a former chicken shed on Stocks Farm near Worcester. It's known as the Hop Shed after being converted into a brewery and pub which opens twice a week. It's the brainchild of brewer Sarah Seller and farmer Ali Kappa.
I think we were the first hop farm in the country to have a brewery. There is another one now. For us, it was about being able to showcase what we do and, I guess, bring the field straight into the glass.
And it's very lively. Is it like this all the time?
It's actually quite quiet tonight, but every Friday there's a really good vibe down here. The local community love it, and there's often 100 to 200 people. There's pop-up food every Friday, and on a Saturday the brewery's open from 1 until 6 at this time of year. People do travel from quite a long way because it's different.
Obviously you grow hops on the farm. Does all the beer that is served here contain your hops in?
Nearly all of it. Sarah's really good at supporting not only ourselves but also some of the other local hop growers. And obviously we don't grow every single British hop that's available, so it's really lovely that Sarah's able to get those British hops from the little local farms around us. But obviously we grow a lot of hops here at Stocks Farm, and it's fantastic to be able to showcase especially the new varieties through the beers here at the Hop Shed.
Sarah Seller established the brewery. She's a former teacher from South London who moved to Worcestershire to escape the rat race, and with a view to setting up her own brewery business.
It just took a bit of vision. They built a wall to divide a little bit of the chicken shed for us, and we started renting it, built ourselves a cold store for the beer, had the brewery installed, a fabulous British-made brew house. Once we'd sort of set up and started brewing, we built a tiny little bar in the corner. And we thought, people might want to come and taste the beer maybe. I remember taking a photo when there were about 8 people in the bar and putting it on our social media going, busy night at the Hop Shed tonight. Because we had no tables or chairs, we had no heating. It was just a few local farmers. All we served was our beer. And then gradually more people came, and then we kind of introduced a few other local drinks, and then more people came, so we bought some tables and chairs, and then more people came, so we put some heating in. And it's just grown from there.
It's just a lovely, relaxed atmosphere. And what's so pleasant about it is a lot of the local parents from the primary school tend to come here early evening with the kids. Plenty of space, they can run around nice and happily.
It's really nice the fact they use British hops for all their beer.
It's a great idea. It's very popular locally because it's informal. It's a good chance to meet all the local people. The beer's not bad either.
Indeed, the Hop Shed is such a success, it now employs several staff.
It amazes me every Friday night. I stand and look at all the people here and think, what are they all doing here? We're in the middle of nowhere. It's amazing, but it's lovely.
Brewer Sarah Seller there. There's one house plant that seems to sum up Christmas, the poinsettia. Its bright red bracts appear on supermarket shelves throughout the festive season, and around 7.5 million are sold here every year. 4.5 million are grown in the UK. But growers are demanding urgent talks with the government and say next year's crop could be under threat because of what they call disproportionate plant hygiene rules that mean crops are being destroyed unnecessarily. Wayne Eady is Managing Director of Volmary Limited in Cambridgeshire, one of the country's UK's leading poinsettia producers and says the problem is a pest called tobacco whitefly, or Bemisia tobacci.
DEFRA are particularly keen to keep this bug away from the UK because it can potentially affect, to a relatively small extent, tomato and pepper crops. Unfortunately, if there is anything above a very small tolerance, APHA can then issue what they call destruction notices, and they can effectively force us to throw away the crop.
How much of your poinsettia crop have you lost this year and in previous years as well?
This year, not so much, I'm pleased to say. In previous years, quite a lot. So last year, for example, we lost £185,000 worth of the crop, which was far more than the money that we earned from the crop.
And what does that mean for your business when that happens?
It's pretty devastating. The problem typically emerges quite late in the life cycle of the crop, so typically starts to show itself in September and October. By that point in time, you've pretty well sunk all of the money into the crop. So 80% plus of the total sales revenue is probably sunk into the crop at that point. If that crop is then thrown away, that's clearly devastating to a business's profitability.
And also, this is a seasonal crop, isn't it? So you've got staff there at a specific point in the calendar to help grow these plants for Christmas, I presume.
Correct. The main reason for anybody to grow a poinsettia crop is to retain core staff. If you run a seasonal glasshouse business where you grow bedding plants or any kind of house plants, typically there's a peak season during the spring. After that, if you can grow a poinsettia crop, you can retain a good number of staff through the autumn so that you retain those skills for the following spring. In our case, that's around 45 people that we would otherwise have to let go if we didn't keep the poinsettia crop.
These flies, though, they do pose a risk, don't they, to a tomato crop? So isn't it better to be safe than sorry?
Our point is that the risk is relatively low to tomato crops. Most tomato nurseries are located in places not near a poinsettia glasshouse and not near a consumer's home where there's any great risk. Typically when poinsettias are in circulation is when it's cold, and the cold will kill it. Our ongoing debate with DEFRA is why the rest of Europe, tomato industry, which is significantly bigger than the UK industry, and the poinsettia industries manage to coexist perfectly well.
So they don't have the same process of coming in and destroying poinsettias, say in Holland, where both of those crops are grown?
Absolutely not.
So what are you asking DEFRA Secretary Steve Reed to do?
What we would like to see is a new classification of the Bemisia, where it's a regulated non-quarantine pest as opposed to quarantine pest. The levels of risk from this specific pest are very low, and we think that the risk to jobs and the risk to margins on top of other current risks that we're all being hit with is massively disproportionate. If you have this problem in September and October, it's incredibly stressful and it's potentially incredibly damaging to a business. So among the dozen or so poinsettia growers, there's a lot of nervousness about committing to next year's crop until we know really where DEFRA are prepared to make any change to the legislation.
Poinsettia grower Wayne Eadie. Well, DEFRA told us we have strict biosecurity measures in place to minimise risks to the UK plant industry. We continue to engage with the industry to best protect against this pest. It explains that a review of the quarantine status of tobacco whitefly was conducted last year, and the outcome included retaining its status as a GB quarantine pest. That's all from us this morning. I'm Anna Hill. The producer is Heather Simons. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.